Call the meeting to order. Sandra, we've complied with the Open Meetings Act? Okay. Jane, would you call the roll, please?
Chairman Potter, District 1.
Here.
Vice Chair Amos, District 5. Secretary Putnam, at large.
Here.
Secretary Hunter, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hunter.
Here.
Commissioner Ray.
Here.
Commissioner Ritz.
Here.
Commissioner Conway.
Here.
Okay. Minutes?
I'd move for approval of the minutes as listed. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jane, would you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Amos.
Aye.
Secretary Putnam.
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter.
Aye.
Commissioner Ray.
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz.
Aye.
Commissioner Conway.
Aye.
Chairman Potter.
Aye. Okay, we have a new employee. Vic, you want to introduce him?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Secretary Gatz, thank you all for being here. We decided to copy a page from Lincoln Riley's playbook. So we went down to Alabama and we recruited a young man who went to one of the premier aviation programs, I think in the country, Commissioner Ritz, I think you'd probably agree with that, Commissioner Conway, Auburn. And he was working at our counterpart in Alabama, and he decided, he became wise and decided, he and his wife, that they needed to move to Oklahoma. So we thought it was an opportune time, and we decided to bring Adam on. And so he has replaced Catherine, and we're really happy to have him. Here he is right here. Take a bow. You want to say you're not a spy for Alabama, are you?
I'm not.
Okay, well, we should have asked that first, I guess, but the word spy makes me crazy these days, so, but we're glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, your report, Vic?
Commissioners, we're trying to show you all the stuff we're up to at the Aeronautics Commission, but I'm gonna really focus in on a couple. The first item about the Air Force Sustainment Center luncheon and update, that was actually hosted by the Midwest City Chamber. There's also one in the fall hosted by the Oklahoma City Chamber. I do attend both of them. It is, after all, our largest single-site employer and probably the biggest economic impact of any single entity that was addressed in our economic impact study. That was a good address by General Kirkland, and heard about all the good work and things going on out at the Air Force Sustainment Center. Some of you have certainly seen that about the KC-46 sustainment's going to be here, the new bomber sustainment's going to be here, a lot of great things going on out at Tinker. The next item, very important, we're probably among state agencies, and I'll probably come back to this and mention it when I'm talking about House Bill 2118. We are seen as the Part 77 experts insofar as state agencies are concerned, state entities, and that's understandable given our zoning authority that we exercise to protect public use airports, including our military airports. But our good friends at the FAA, the regional administrator, Michelle Coppage, director of the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center, they helped to arrange for us some training that's done by out of Kansas City. There's a specific group that is focused upon wind energy development, wind turbines, and the leaders of that group came and gave us a training session for us out at the Monroney Aeronautical Center, and that was very, very helpful. Certainly probably put some things in neon lights, which we maybe thought or weren't quite clear of, but that were made clear for us at that training. The Northwest Oklahoma Alliance legislative reception, that's become one of the premier events. You've got several communities and counties up that way, Alva, Guyman, and Enid all cooperate in that to really have a big show. The governor's there, the lieutenant governor's there, that was at the History Center, and it was a good place to be at and get to interact with legislators as well as the governor and lieutenant governor and various other leaders of the private sector as well as state government. Very proud of this next one. This first time we've been invited to this. It's probably the third time that it has occurred. The Oklahoma Military Commanders Summit at Tinker Air Force Base. The ranking, if you will, officer of the military in the state of Oklahoma convenes a group of all the other commanders of the bases, Fort Sill, Air Guard, at Tinker to talk about issues that are important and crucial to them, as well as their interaction with state government. So we were invited this year, I would say largely due to our work on our effort to protect military training airspace, but also along with the Department of Commerce, our good friend over there, Vince Howey, to talk about legislation that may affect the military, the Air Force, the Army, and to specifically give some focus upon the bill to protect military training airspace, the one this year as well as what was done last year during the legislative session. The ACES, Aerospace Commerce Economic Services Program Act, that was Sandra came up with that acronym, and then we had to figure out the words that went with it, but it was a great acronym, so we knew we had to do that. The agency forum, all public agencies that affect the first one of that nature, that was held out at Francis Tuttle North, and I'd say about probably 7, 8, maybe 9 agencies showed up. We had a good meeting there to talk about what agencies do with respect to the aerospace industry, how they impact the aerospace industry, specific programs that we have, and how we can work together rather than duplicating efforts to be more efficient and actually certainly to be more helpful and eliminate confusion. Now, also, I'd mentioned that the first ACES annual meeting of all stakeholders, all interested parties, companies, private sector, as well as the public sector, chambers, economic development authorities, was held immediately after Aero Oklahoma Day at the Capitol on April the 19th. We had a great, I guess you'll be the judge of that, Chairman Potter, speaking engagement in Bartlesville on March the 29th, and I think probably ended up speaking to at the Arvest Forum that's held on every Friday, and I'd say maybe over 100 people.
They average around.
Yeah.
It's
It's a good group. One of our former commissioners, Kenneth Adams, was there, and had several former legislators as well as current legislators. Former Representative Earl Sears is the organizer of that forum, and there's actually a little warm-up for that is a breakfast at 6 o'clock in a town of 200 called Vera, but it was a great breakfast. That will be the last time I get up at 4:30 though for a breakfast. It reminded me of my paper out days, and I said this is why I stopped that line of work. But it was really good. We then went out to the airport after that. Chairman Potter took us out there and had a really good discussion with the airport about its future, its planning, what it plans to do, and that is an extremely important airport. It's operated actually by Phillips 66. Services Phillips 66 and ConocoPhillips. I mean, it is the biggest user of the airport, and that is the biggest employer in the city of Bartlesville. So it was overall a good trip to Bartlesville, America. Sandra and I went to the Oklahoma National Guard legislative reception, and that was, again, that was very well attended. Lieutenant Governor was there. I can't recall if the governor was there or not. Perhaps so, but I'm not sure he was. But a lot of many legislators and people, officials with the Guard, got to see the Adjutant General, so forth, and largely our discussions were focused upon the military training airspace issue. Stillwater Rotary Club, I guess Commissioner Conway will be the judge of that. Myself and Grayson did that on April 25th. A lot of, I twice worked for the OSU Regents, so I saw a lot of old friends. Former Senator Halligan was there. It was a good event, probably 80 to 100 people, and we talked about the economic impact of aerospace and aviation in Oklahoma, and I think that went fairly well. Have also met with OU about their, you may have read about it in the paper, about their executive MBA program, about aerospace logistics. Did that some time ago. They're trying to bring that online and I think get it started for next academic year. We've been visiting with Leadership Oklahoma. I used to several years back. I would always be part of a presentation to the new group at Leadership Oklahoma about the importance of aerospace and aviation and airports in Oklahoma. They want to do that again. They kind of want to take it around the state and have lunches with their new class and actually alumni in various communities across the state. Cody Holcomb, our good friend down at Ada, the city manager, is very involved in Leadership Oklahoma, and he is helping in that effort. And then last week, we had the OU Aviation Advisory Board meeting at OU down at Norman, and also the spring banquet where we celebrate the graduates from the program for this year. And our own Grayson Arties was on a distinguished panel with James Grimsley and several others, and our own Commissioner Lindy Ritz was the moderator of that panel. And she was very fair. She didn't throw him any curves, and Grayson did real well talking about the pilot shortage and the economic impact of aerospace and what opportunities it presents for anyone graduating with some kind of aviation degree or certification at this time. Concludes my report. I'd stand for questions.
Any questions? Okay. Committee on Pilot Shortage, Vic and Commissioner Putnam.
Yes, I'm going to be smart here. I learned a long time ago. I should definitely defer to my bosses. So I think I'll defer to you, Commissioner Putnam, in this regard.
Okay, make it short and sweet. We had an excellent meeting that encompassed reps from the industry, from the local colleges that have aviation programs, from instructor flight schools up in Tulsa. We also had information about the AOPA, Aircraft Owners Pilot Association, prototype curriculum for STEM education for aviation programs and flying, primarily focused on being pilots. Down in Ada, they've got a really good one-year program where AOPA is rolling out the curriculum in one-year increments. So they started out with their senior year where they have the basic fundamentals of flight and so on, so one can go through that program and be ready to go into flying training. They're working backwards now so that they'll have, at the end of 4 years, a separate STEM program and curriculum for each of the 4 years of high school. So, Vic, I think I got that backwards. They started at the freshman year this year, didn't they?
I think so.
Yeah.
I know that Sandra would know that, probably, but I think so.
There are 14 other schools in Oklahoma that are now stepping up to do that. AOPA is rolling out another curriculum next year, so they'll have 2 years for the fall semester, starting in the fall, and then 3, and then 4 the next 2 subsequent years. It seems to be a real eye-opener to the local communities about how much STEM is involved, science, technology, engineering, mathematics is involved in that kind of curriculum. And it suddenly opens our eyes as to there is a real pilot shortage because it's a growing population, and we need a lot of new folks coming in. We also talked about the Ray Aviation Scholarships being offered by the AOPA for teenagers 16 to 19 to get a private pilot's license. And the local chapter of the Experimental Aircraft Association finally got one of those scholarships and is administering it now. What it takes is a youth, 16 to 19, and puts them all the way through to their private pilot's license. It's a value of up to $10,000. The one thing that came out is that the number of hours required to become an airline co-pilot at 1,500 drives a lot of people to become instructor pilots, and the moment they get close to that, they get a job offer, and then when they hit that hour, they're gone. So the operator of the Tulsa Flight School mentioned that they have a horrendous turnover problem. The same problem with folks who have teaching aviation, was it Southwest Oklahoma and OU? Both,
Southeastern, OU, and OSU
both have a
probably.
horrendous turnover in instructor pilots. And OU has a capacity problem that they can take more students, but they don't have enough instructor pilots for them. So it seemed to be a multifaceted problem. One was STEM education, moving that around the state at a much higher level. Instructor pilot retention problems, and the third was we're just not producing enough pilots. So I haven't seen the minutes on that meeting yet. I'm looking forward to it, but we need to have another meeting and get a bit more focused. We are not to the point where we can recommend any state remedy or legislation of that nature. Vic, I'll open for
Commissioner Hunter, Commissioner Rich, Commissioner Conway, you're on that committee. Any comments from you?
From what I saw, the primary thrust was, at least from airlines, from universities, and from the military. They're all about that 1,500 hours, and they don't understand that just getting people to that private pilot's license in the first place is good for them. It's a codependent relationship. You've got to have those private pilots before you can ever get to that next step. Rather than expecting people to jump in and say, oh, I'm gonna commit to go become a commercial pilot when I haven't even become a basic VFR single engine pilot in the first place. One is good for the other. I mean, but it all begins at the private pilot level. And what they're doing is cannibalizing the instructors that make that happen.
Yeah. And then we learned too, both Vance and Tinker were there. Altus was unable to make it, but they were both there, and they certainly spoke to the issue. And they said the same thing. Even though they're providing incentives now, I can't remember how much it is a year.
35,000.
35,000, something like that. 10 years, because the Air Force can't match what an airline's gonna offer them. I mean, they're ready to go.
What I was surprised at was that OU and OSU, the programs are, 30 students a year here, 15, 20 a year there. We're not making a dent in it. I mean, if you're talking a shortage of 3,000 a year, 4,000 a year, I think,
The Air Force is 2,000 short right now in fighter pilots.
that your 20, 30, 50 students isn't gonna make a dent. And again, I would respectfully submit that where you've got a problem, you've got an opportunity for the state that can figure out a solution to it.
Mr. Rich, Commissioner Conway, no?
Did I understand you to say that we'll probably meet after the session?
Yeah, we appreciate your indulgence. A little bit difficult, just winding up session and a number of other things that have been going. We thought it might be good if we could maybe have the committee meeting following this commission meeting, but it actually turned out to be a little, perhaps a bridge too far. So appreciate you giving us until June and actually having a committee meeting when we don't have a commission meeting. Think that this got, I think some of you saw, there was an article in the Oklahoman. I think there was one in the Journal Record, and there might have even been an electronic media story. There was certainly a lot on the social media about it. It's a very important issue, and so I think we need to be very studious, very deliberate, measure twice and saw once, but it deserves almost to be treated, not, very separately, in a sense, that we devote the proper focus and attention to it. So thank you for allowing us till June, and we'll get out to you with some kind of doodle poll, or I don't know what those are. It makes me think I'm supposed to do this, and people tell me I'm supposed to do something else. But we'll get to you and figure out when is a good date. It'll be a special meeting, so the Open Meeting Act requirements are not. We're able to give 48-hour notice and get our agenda up 24 hours before, and we're good to go. So we'll be reaching out to you.
I would agree with Commissioner Hunter, though. The problem really is starting out private pilots. And I've been involved in a couple university aviation groups that are nationwide, been identified for many, many years, but they've tried to come up with solutions for the instructor cadre, how to keep them in the airplane while instructing. So the problem has been ongoing at least 10 years. It's been identified over and over again with no real solution. So we're coming along toward the end of 10 years of investigation on how to do this. The incentive is just so high to go to an airline.
Right.
And so
And it's not always been that way.
but that's not the end goal. Not every pilot should be an instructor. I think those of us that have done this for a while know that, there's people that instruct that shouldn't, and those that should don't. However, right now, carrying the mail and doing things that were normal years and years ago to build hours are gone. And so right now, the flight instruction seems to be the only thing that gets them to either 1,000 hours for a university school or 1,500. So this is a problem that's going to get worse in the future with all these agreements with Emory or Envoy and all these different regional airlines that are going to the schools that are incentivizing these students to hurry up, graduate, and you get your signing bonus when you walk out the door. So we've got a very, very astute observation for you, Commissioner Hunter. That's very true.
I've been railing about this for years, and I'm delighted that the commission is finally sitting up and taking notice and acknowledging that the problem exists.
Just to note on this picture here, really, I just want to note this, that right there in the back of the table, a fellow with the laptop, that's Dale Denwalt from the Oklahoman, and he wrote a very nice article about it, and I'm happy to say that his presence didn't, of course, it was an open meeting, didn't chill any discussion. We were dealing in only the facts, so we let it, we were very vocal about voicing our opinions and so forth with respect to the issue and problem, so.
Well, what Ada has done is incredible, what she's done down there. And I think you either have to do something like that or get it through the VOTEC system to get it in there,
Or both.
or both.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
right. And, because we've got a great VOTEC system in the
We do.
state. And
One of the best, well,
It is.
the only one of its kind in the
that's
nation.
right. And so, between those two, if you get high schools and the VOTEC to do this, and as everybody that's ever flown, all it took was one time going up, and all of a sudden, you get it's a bug. And
Well,
so,
we're 10 years too late.
I understand that, but,
We're now at a crisis, and we're
But-
gonna push it out.
but if we don't start today,
Well, we've
Well,
got
we
to
we,
worse.
so,
yesterday.
And we've got to address the flight instructor.
that's right.
Because no matter how many that you could take in, you don't have the instructors.
Right.
And our friends at our community colleges, we have a representative from Rose State here today. Tulsa Community College already does something. They may well have a important role to play in this as well. One thing about and it is outstanding, the AOPA high school curriculum and the program that's Ada, it's a model. AOPA points to that as a model for other high schools that are contemplating it. That is still electives, and a discussion that's taking place is trying to make that possible, that some of those could be substituted for core curriculum. That requires a discussion with the State Board of Education, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we're trying to facilitate such a discussion and to bring that about. But to accomplish that would require action of the State Board of Education.
Okay. Any other comments? Who's, number 7, who's doing?
I will certainly let Sandra comment on some highlights. She's good at that, highlights. Just a brief for me, it was our best aviation days, we used to call it Aviation and Aerospace Day, our best Aero Oklahoma Day ever. There were about 900 folks that attended. We had all 5 floors of the Capitol. If there is a 6th floor, and if we could have gotten that, we probably, but there's not public access up there. Had 85 exhibitors, so it was really, in that regard, we made a big splash. Then we had various visits going on, teams, if you will, representing aerospace industry, representing airports, with legislative leadership. In this picture right here, you'll see several senators. In that meeting also was the President Pro Tem, Greg Treat, several representatives of, you've got Boeing and Northrop Grumman standing together. It could be a moment. We probably need to put
Call
that on.
themselves competimates.
We've got our official with the Air Force Association, that's a good friend of Commissioner Putnam's, Mark Tarpley. Senator Dave Rader from Tulsa, who obviously in American Airlines is standing to his right, our left. This was the aerospace industry ambassadors. Grayson led a group of airports industry ambassadors. They too had meetings of leadership. Our meeting with the speaker went very, very well, as it has the last 2 years. He is very supportive of all things, it seems, aviation, aerospace. His family has used aviation in its business, so he understands the importance of it. And he has been very critical support to the Choctaw Nation's UAS IPP, Integrated Pilot Program. So,
The only thing I have to add is that, as far as I can tell, this is the first time a flag of that magnitude and size has ever been flown in the Capitol. So we were really happy that we were able to accomplish that. And we fed over 200 airmen.
Sandra always worries about details like that. I do too, but we will loan that flag to OU next year for its spring banquet so that we'll have some place to look to when we do the Pledge of Allegiance. That was, I know that was a sudden, Okay, just imagine the flag in your mind and we'll look over here. So, Senator Bergstrom, good to have you. So, that was a great day. And next year, plans could be, there's always the threat that they're going to close the 4th floor as part of the major rehabilitation at our state capitol. We don't know yet. That was also said this year. We do know if they do, that presents a venue problem for us. I mean, we want to have it at the Capitol. We want to get in front of legislative leadership, state government leadership. What we might try to do, for continuity purposes, is have some kind of breakfast or have some kind of reception if the 4th floor rotunda is indeed closed. We'll keep you posted.
Okay.
Secretary Gatz will help us expedite. They should do that when they're not in session, for God's sakes, but maybe
All right.
they need some of our airport planning and programming.
Legislative update. Director Byrd and Sandra.
Yes. All right, going to try to be brief on this, but I do want to be rather thorough on House Bill 2118, the bill to enhance protection of military training airspace. The first bill, and I don't want to, this is really important. We just accomplished something last year that we really worked on about 10 or 15 years. The debate started a long time ago. As you all know, our largest source of revenue is the aircraft excise tax. Brings in 90% plus of our revenues. $4 to $6 million a year, historic, over time. There's 18 exemptions to our aircraft excise tax, more than any other state. The one that the Incentive Evaluation Commission identified as having the biggest impact, a bleed of at least $2.4 million a year, but certainly could be more, because frankly, in the tax commission, we're just really don't know what's exactly going on out there. But that's a lot of money for us when there's that kind of bleed. And that was because, unlike any other state, not all states allow an exemption to an aircraft owner if they get their aircraft put on a charter ticket. 26 states do. Before last legislative session, we were the only state that just get it put on the ticket, enter into a lease. Whether it's ever used for a charter operation is inconsequential. All other states were 50%. Kentucky was exclusive. And now I'm really led to believe, from what I found out, that Kansas is exclusive. Kansas allows the exemption, but it's exclusive. It's got to be operated charter, 100%. What we did in the legislation last year, 50% of the operations, like the 25 other states, have to be charter. It's fair. It is fair. We're keeping in mind 24 states don't allow this at all. As we predicted, there was an effort this year, 2 bills. You were familiar with one of them in the Senate, to repeal what we had accomplished last year. We were able to defend what we had, and that was really important. It would have been a real slap in the face, and certainly would not have been a good sign if what we just accomplished last year got repealed, got reversed. Stood our ground, defended it. I really do. It's one of those, I do think the facts are on our side. It's pretty overwhelming. So I don't know if that'll come back. It could. It never made it. The Senate bill was out early. Thank you, Chairman Potter, for helping us with that. It was being run by a friend of his, Senator Daniels. The House bill by Representative O'Donnell did get through committee barely by the chinny chin chin. I don't think everyone, as I talked to representatives who voted that, I think it prevailed by 3 votes. They really, well, yeah, we shouldn't have voted for that. Never made it to the House floor. Representative Wright was very helpful over there, the Speaker Pro Tem, who carried the legislation for us last year. So, will it come back? Don't worry, we'll be vigilant. House Bill 2118, this is the bill enhancing protection of our military training airspace. It really is, in a sense, a continuance from the legislation that was passed last year and had the emergency clause last year. When it was signed by then Governor Fallon, it became effective immediately. There were some problems with that, as came into sharp focus when a wind farm was being developed west of Oklahoma City. You all know about it. I've visited with you about it on several occasions, the Minco 4-5 wind farm. That pointed to us, we needed to clarify some things. We needed to, in a sense, strengthen the legislation and the requirements and responsibilities through such clarification. And that's what this bill does. Clarifies the responsibilities and requirements of not only the wind energy industry, the developer, but also the state agencies that have a role in ensuring that our military training airspace is protected. And that would be the Corporation Commission, the Strategic Military Planning Commission, and now we have been added specifically having particular requirements. And so real quickly, I want to highlight what I consider to be the most important points in the legislation. The notice that must be filed with the FAA if you're going to put a stick in the ground, the 7460-1, must be submitted to the Aeronautics Commission within 30 days of filing with the FAA. Now, contrast that, we didn't change. What was in the law was that had to be submitted, or something the equivalent of that, as prescribed by the Corporation Commission, that had to be submitted within 6 months. That's a lot of time. We are able to shorten that 30 days. That gives us, in a sense, the leeway we need to see what's going on exactly when we get these 7460-1s, and we'll get a lot of them because we get one for every turbine, every stick. We need to know what's going on. We need to be able to jump on it quickly after they've made their filing with FAA. That's the first important point. Second, any subsequent 7460-1 notice to FAA, because they're going to move the turbine where it was originally going to be, or they're going to raise it, it's going to be higher, and it doesn't qualify for microsighting, if you will. That too has got to be filed within 10 days. We've got to have that filed with us, submitted to us within 10 days of filing to the FAA, and that goes to the Corporation Commission as well. There was some lack of clarity about that. And let me not overlook, I keep talking about, there was one of the biggest confusions about the legislation that actually had preceded what we did last year was, can we just turn in a map for a wind farm, or do we have to turn in something for every turbine? Well, you all know very well, it's every stick. Every stick can have an impact on navigable airspace and aviation safety. So that's very clear now. That's one of the biggest points of the bill. It has to be for just whatever you got to file with the FAA, you got to submit it to the state, to the Aeronautics Commission in very short order, 30 days, and to the Corporation Commission within 60 days. The OSMPC, we notify the OSMPC of such a filing, and then it notifies the base commanders what this is, what's going on, and it facilitates hearing from the base commanders any objections they might have, any concerns they might have about adverse impacts. The Strategic Military Planning Commission then drafts a letter to the Department of Defense clearinghouse outlining those areas of impact and those concerns. We will, of course, OSMPC is a voluntary board, just like you, the Strategic Military Planning Commission, does not have a staff. Every state agency, by law, in the enabling legislation for the Strategic Military Planning Commission, is required to assist that commission. We have been doing that for some time, and we will, of course, do that with respect to these duties. The underlying federal process processes, I should say. Last year, this was the case, but we said or. So if you complied with the FAA process that's about protecting navigable airspace, Part 77 as you know it, and you got a determination of no hazard, that was good enough, even if the military had problems, because we used that word or. So but it was in the disjunctive. That was the proposition. Satisfy one or the other, you're good to go. If you could come forward and present a mitigation plan that had been approved through the DOD process, and that's all you had, and submitted that to the Corporation Commission, that was good too. There was a flaw in that. There was a weakness. So this year in this legislation, and I think very significant, got to satisfy both processes. You might.
Accidentally summon me.
Well, have I made my point about Apple phones? They're listening. They're listening. It may be Steve Jobs, but kind of like a ghost. But both processes have to be complied with. You've got to show that you've satisfied the FAA process and you've obtained a determination of no hazard, and that you have satisfied any concerns by the military through its clearinghouse process. That's a major strength and a major victory for us that want to do this, want to successfully protect our military training airspace in this bill. Proof of compliance with both these processes must be submitted to the Corporation Commission and the Aeronautics Commission. That's new. It's got to come to us as well. And if the wind owner, another clarification, if the wind owner fails to submit proof prior to construction beginning, then it is subject to a fine. This was not in the law last year. It can be fined by the Corporation Commission, $1,500 a day per violation, and, not or, and all stakeholders, but specifically the Corporation Commission and Aeronautics Commission can move forward into district court and seek injunctive relief. Temporary restraining order, abatement, so forth. That's specifically spelled out now. The Strategic Military Planning Commission would, of course, also have standing, and I think there perhaps would be several other stakeholders. So those are, in my mind, certainly the key points of the bill. Grayson was very, very helpful, and yes, I don't think we'll lose him to FAA, but they do like him in that Part 77 obstruction and evaluation group. And FAA was very helpful. I'd say FAA was quite helpful to us. We had many. There has been hours spent with wind energy, and I have to say, wind energy agrees with this bill. They worked constructively, I believe, by and large, to bring about some solutions from the problem that happened last summer. So they're on board. So I think that's a good thing. The FAA was very, very helpful in getting here, and we spent many, many hours with the Department of Defense, with Mike Cooper, and a real, have to take my hat off, a real champion legislator, Representative Charles Ortega, who was the House author of the legislation last year, had the courage to stand up and do the right thing. And my hat off to him. He's been steadfastly in the corner on this since the beginning of this challenge and trying to get our hands around it and bring about some successful resolution. Senator Stanislawski was our Senate author this year. Senator Schultz was retired due to term limits after last session, and I appreciated him very much. Senator Adam Pugh was also very involved, and there's a number of co-authors that have signed on. Just remarkable. You rarely see this. I know Secretary Gatz will agree with this. So 3 times this bill got a vote. First time in the House, it was 93 zip. First time and only time in the Senate, it was 43 to zip. Thank you, Commissioner Ray. I think you helped out a little bit on that. And last time when it went back to the House with some Senate amendments that the House author agreed to, accepted, 87 to zip. Never got a negative vote, but on the Senate committee, the Senate Energy Committee got 1 negative vote. That same senator didn't vote against it, didn't vote when it went to the Senate floor. So pretty overwhelming, unequivocal, absolute support for this bill. Let me stop here. Does anyone have any questions since I'm spent more time on this bill than I will on the next bill and any other comments.
So Vic, do there's no signing permit required to come to the OAC?
No, and I think actually a good thing. When we started this adventure 3 years ago, and actually we knew it was out there when we got the Aircraft Pilot and Passenger Protection Act, State Zoning Authority, 9 years ago. But starting in 2017, that was an effort to utilize our zoning authority and have a permitting process to protect this valuable asset. 2018, it was very clear that was going to be a really tall hill to climb. Wynn was very opposed to that. We had worked with them very well when we did APA in 2010, and then when we did the requirements for marking Met Towers in 2014. But it was just a change in their outlook on it. So they were going to oppose that. So we came up with this scheme, this concept, if you will. We're actually using a very light touch. But what we've done that's critical, the federal processes are advisory regulatory processes. They do not have teeth. The FAA, there are federal district judges who have questioned this, and there are federal district judges who have agreed with it. Cannot go to court, even if they've issued a determination of hazard, and stop someone. They don't have zoning authority. That's the ultimate authority if you want to prevent a stick from going in the ground. Zoning authority. That's reserved to the states and local government. DOD, that's all right, but it probably wouldn't go to court. So what we did, though, those federal processes, we gave them teeth. And several states have done this. Some by erecting a permitting process, requiring, no matter where it is, not just around public airports like ours is right now, but anywhere in airspace in Nebraska. You have to get a permit from our counterpart up there, and you have to show that you've satisfied the federal processing. So we've done that here with a lighter touch. I think we did a great balancing act. No one, as I've said many times, I am not anti-wind energy. But I am, however, for our military being able to harmoniously exist and coexist and not at a detriment to our wind energy industry. They both can coexist, and one shouldn't have priority over the other. And I think we've erected that balance. I have great hopes for this legislation. There may be an issue down the road, but I really think this legislation is going to do what we need it to do. And if there's a problem, someone hasn't complied with the law that I think is very clear now, we need to take action. And we have several actions we can take.
So you're confident this is gonna work?
Yes.
Okay, because I was hearing about towers being erected into the approach to the drop zone for Altus.
Yeah, but I am confident, not only, we're also the radar issue, that whole issue, that's gonna be addressed by this. Because again, we're relying upon the underlying federal processes. We're relying upon wind energy developer. There's a form the clearinghouse has prescribed, come up with. You've got to show us through what you file with the state of Oklahoma that DOD is good with this proposition. And indeed, the very thing that brought this all about, the Minco 4-5 wind farm and that development, those settlement negotiation go on. They are still going on. That has still not been completely resolved about where those turbines are going.
Okay.
I think, Commissioner, you had also asked me because of whether before the meeting, whether the filing requirements were actually being transferred. No, that's a bit of a misnomer on the agenda. They are not. In a sense, there's an additional filing requirement with us now as well. And I think I pointed those out pretty clearly. Corporation Commission, and I'm happy about this, still also has a role in this. So you really have 3 state agencies. Corporation Commission that's had responsibilities with respect to the Wind Energy Development Act since it was passed in 2011. Now the Aeronautics Commission, and of course there's the Strategic Military Planning Commission.
Okay.
That should be enough watchers to make sure that the law is being complied with. Other questions? 2518, this was actually a bill, we've visited about it in our March meeting. This was a bill that was championed by the Oklahoma City Airport Authority to allow simply, right now, the lease term that an airport can enter into is 40 years. For some purposes of economic development and so forth, with companies that want to make a big capital investment and build a big facility, be it a SkyWest or whomever it may be, they would like a little more time on that lease to recoup their capital investment. And so for purposes of economic development, this was critical. So now instead of 40 years, which was part of the original Municipal Airports Act passed in 1947, it's a little while back. You know. So now it has moved to 50 years. Still, that's acceptable by the FAA. So I think a good measure for economic development and development of our airports, commercial as well as general aviation. So some just thoughts for the future. One other, we've had 2 Aero Caucus breakfasts during the session. Senator Adam Pugh has helped to organize those and coordinate those. Also, looking forward, I definitely think we want to circle back and attempt to repeal our cap, as we did have legislation in that regard on the aircraft excise tax. It's our largest source of revenue. Right now that's capped at $4.5 million. It has impacted us once since it's only been in existence since 2015. Before that time we were getting 100%, so it's not the standard, it's not the norm. Got to remember who's paying this in, aircraft owners who expect that that's going to be invested back into the state airport system. So going to try to raise that again next session. And I think we have to continually, I think there's been an awakening among our airport constituents. We definitely have a funding dilemma staring us in the face. I've talked to you all about this before. Over the next 20 years, we've got $1.8 billion in needs. We've got $1 billion, excuse me, with a B, $1.8 billion in needs, $1 billion available to address those needs. It's an obvious shortage. Can we expect the federal government to do something and up what's in the FAA Airport Improvement Program? Well, it didn't happen last reauthorization. Now, there's efforts right now to maybe try to tweak that, what was just passed last fall, but it didn't happen, and there was kumbaya support for that from aviation associations everywhere. It didn't happen. And you see this continual struggle in Washington about infrastructure. We know we need to do things, but how are we going to pay for those improvements we need to make? And our aviation system, even it's the world's finest, but it'll only stay that way if we take care of it. We're going to have to do something at the state level. And that's going to take some grassroots effort from our airport constituents and a lot of support to figure out, does that mean, as Commissioner Hunter and I have talked about a little bit, right now we know that from our economic impact study that the 440 businesses on our 108 airports in our system pay in $500 million in state and local taxes. Approximately $330 million of that comes to the state coffer. Does not come to us, goes to general revenue. We get zero of that. So is it an appropriation? Perhaps. Several legislators, as we were working repeal the cap bill at the beginning of the session, several legislators mentioned that very possibility. Maybe that's what needs to happen. There's also a beauty, and I'm sure Secretary Gatz could talk, when you get the fees and the taxes that are being paid by the users of the system, and that's all coming to the agency that's supposed to take care of the system and improve the system, the simplicity of that, there's an eloquence to that. But there's going to be more.
You're able to mill $1.5 billion out of that over the next.
Say that again, I'm
You're
sorry.
not going to be able to generate $1.5 billion.
Well, we're not going to be, I'm just looking for 800 million, but we won't get that all from the state. There's no question. The federal government's going to have to grapple with this and figure out a way to do the improvements it needs to all our infrastructure systems.
And if the state wants to keep that 500 million or whatever it is a year rolling into the state coffers, that's generated by the aviation industry, they're gonna have to put something back.
Well, I like what you're saying. And I'm not even talking about the 870 businesses that are off airports, that are aviation. They pay in taxes too.
Right.
So, last thing is, there's been an issue that's come up on engineer tax credits. I've worked closely with Senator Standridge and Representative Rosecrans. They've had one constituent that has been particularly impacted by that. Senator Standridge is very serious. There are others who have been impacted as well. He is very serious about trying to resolve what is an inequitable result. It's an unfair result that if a person, and very well it could be a person from overseas, has gotten an undergraduate degree from an institution that's not ABET accredited, an engineering degree, then comes to America and gets a graduate degree, a master's in, let's say, mechanical engineering from an institution whose undergraduate program in mechanical is indeed ABET accredited, but the graduate program is not. As I have found out from our friends at OU and OSU, that's really the standard. Even MIT and others, they get their undergraduate programs ABET accredited, and that's the issue. They don't get the graduate. There are very few graduate engineering programs in America at the institutions of higher education that are ABET accredited. Their undergraduate programs are. We wrote the legislation so that a company could hire someone with an undergrad or a grad and receive the credits as long as ABET accredited. But given this nuance, something along the line that to resolve it equitably, that if someone gets their master's or gets their PhD from a program who's undergraduate in that very mechanical or electrical or software, you get my point. If it's ABET accredited, then it's good to go. So, been working on that with him. Recently we had a meeting with Senator Standridge and the Governor's General Counsel, Mark Burgett. And so I expect probably Senator Standridge will go forward with some language next session to address this. Stand for questions.
Any questions? Okay, Tinker and Primes event. Vic?
Come to you about this every year. So we partner with the Department of Commerce in a state booth at the Tinker and Primes event put on by the Midwest City Chamber. It's for our aerospace industry, it's a big event. And so I would ask your approval of the item as written on the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Jane?
Vice Chair Amos.
Aye.
Secretary Putnam.
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter.
Aye.
Commissioner Ray.
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz.
Aye.
Commissioner Conway.
Aye.
Chairman Potter.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jane, financial report.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Secretary Gatz. In your packet, behind the tab with number 10 on it, is the financial information for numbers as of March 31st. As always, I can't get the most current numbers for the month until right about now. So the ending cash balance for March 31st is $4.8 million with just under $5.3 million encumbered. And we have an additional $2,661,724 that's still in the ACP, the Airport Construction Program, that remains to be granted for the FY19 ACP. The year-to-date expenditures for FY19 total $4,637,738, with $3,518,768 of that being for airport construction projects. Our deposits for the month of February totaled $109,299, which compares to last month in February of $877,157. But then for the month of March, it kind of balanced a little bit better. This March, we had 454,807 compared to 165,000 last year. Our year-to-date statutory revenue deposits totaled $2,622,440 compared to $3,471,687 for last year. And then the deposits, like I said, are not final. The numbers aren't final for April yet, but we did get a big deposit this month, so we have approximately 1.5 million that will come in for April. And collections last year for April were 334,000, so we're kind of hitting and missing and making up some of it. And then, as always, the third page shows a 3-year average comparison on the statutory revenues, which are comprised of the aircraft registration fees, excise tax, and fuel tax. And then periodically, we get requests from the legislature, different legislators, for information. And so behind the financials are 2 documents we just wanted to share with you. And some of you may have seen them already, but we put them in there for the public or anybody to see. One was provided to Senator Duggar and the other to Representative Kevin Wright. And it was request letters that we get from them just asking different questions about finances and our programs and how we run the agency, basically. So we just wanted you to see what kind of information is requested from us. I'm currently working on putting together the FY 2020 budget, which will be due June 30th. And after I get it completed and it is accepted, I will provide you a summary of that budget. That is about all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
You all will remember at the beginning of the session, we appeared, first time I could remember in history, we appeared before a joint meeting of the 2 subcommittees that oversee non-appropriated agencies such as ourselves. And that's hence the 2 reports that Jane has provided in your packet.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Oklahoma Airport Operators Association, Grayson?
Good morning, everybody. The OAOA conference this year was held in Broken Arrow. It was in partnership with the South Central chapter of the American Association of Airport Executives. It's a little bit bigger. We do this about once every 3 or 4 years. I think we did it in 12, again in 15, and then this year in 2019. Good event at the Broken Arrow Conference Center. You see some pictures flipping through there. As always, the opening speaker was our very own Mr. Director Byrd. I think he did light a fire underneath him about mattering and being your airport's greatest proponent, and ways that they can influence the legislature. One of the topics that we talked about during our airport legislative visits at the Capitol during Aero Day was the legislature doesn't see airports very often, and so that maybe needs to change. And so I know Vic spoke. There were some great events or discussions, panels, whatever you'd like to call them, about revenue at your airport. Some lesser exciting topics about compliance and making sure you're going to stay in the good graces of FAA. But overall, it was a good conference. We had some wonderful award ceremonies at the Tuesday awards banquet, both the South Central chapter as well as the OAOA awards, and we'll I think maybe do a little press release on the various awards for Airport of the Year. South Grand Lake Regional Airport Manager of the Year, Brent Howard, the chair of the trust there. There's also several other awards that were given away, but all in all, a good conference there in Broken Arrow. I think everybody walked away with a pretty good semblance, but I think the most important thing that everybody walked away with from that conference was the need to be more involved and the need to further the idea of OAOA and make sure that they are a voice that's heard in all circles. So I think a very good step in the right direction.
May I add just a footnote, commissioners? I really want, we've talked about funding. So you look at Florida, it's a rather remarkable story. 100 million is invested in their 100, from the FAA, in their 129 airports. The state invests 247 million. I don't know that you'll see that played out anywhere else, but I'm not aware of it, where the state, that's not just 2 times, that's about 2.5 times. It's rather amazing. And a lot of the credit for that must go to the Florida Airports Council. We have a specific statutory duty to recommend legislation to the state that will advance the state's interest in aeronautics, whether that's state legislation or to our congressional delegation. In Florida, our counterpart really doesn't go to the legislature very much at all. If there are specific questions, specific issues, of course, but relies upon the Florida Airports Council. And yes, it's very different. Yeah, the population of Florida is 24 million. Our population is 4 million. They have 20 commercial airports. It is different, of course. It is somewhat an apple and an orange. But why shouldn't you think about what's the Cadillac? What is the role model you'd want to follow? And I think OAOA is very much the sleeping giant. And if we're ever going to make inroads, whether it's general appropriation or whatever it may be, it's going to require a grassroots effort, and all our legislators out there that, guess who sees them all the time? Airport managers and city managers. And I did stress that I think OAOA needs to improve its rapport and relationship with the OML, the Municipal League. It's a subset of that. I mean, all our airports are, even the University of Oklahoma's Westheimer Airport, for purposes of airport, it's a municipality, OU. They're all members of the Municipal League. And the Municipal League has a very strong voice. The Capitol, yes, it loses one occasionally, but it wins more than it loses. So I've encouraged them to improve that relationship, pony, if you will, pony OML, get on the back of the OML to help us make sure that we have the system we want, need, that's safe, conforms to standards, and is going to need more state investment.
Any questions? Moving to
Item number 12.
item number 12. A couple airspace meetings. One we attended several weeks ago at Shepherd Air Force Base. Their managed development meeting that talks about all issues at the base, brings in community leaders, but obviously the one topic that's first and foremost in everybody's mind at that meeting is airspace and encroachment issues. So I went down there to kind of provide them an update on House Bill 2118. It was moving through the legislature at that point in time, had not been signed, and explained to them their role, how that's going to work, given that Shepherd does have quite a few routes that come into Oklahoma. Also understanding that although Shepherd's routes, you might think that's Shepherd-owned routes. No, those are just routes assigned to Shepherd. Anybody can fly them. And so Shepherd's a vital piece in the military training airspace picture here in Oklahoma when it comes to making sure that airspace is clear, making sure that we have a successful House Bill 2118. So that being said, there's an upcoming meeting, and behind the tab number 12, you'll see the agenda, a 2-day agenda for the Central Region Airspace and Range Council. That's Central Region of the FAA, so that's, I don't want to list all the states, but basically just take the central United States, from Texas all the way up to North Dakota. And it's being hosted here at Tulsa International Airport. The Tulsa Air National Guard facility is hosting the conference. Last year was in Minnesota. We participated via conference call on a couple of the sessions. But this is obviously everybody getting together on the military side, the FAA side, the DoD side, to discuss the airspace issues and the range issues that are going on in the central region area. So if any of you all would like to attend, let us know. We can send you the invite and be glad to have you there. I think we're going to be there the whole time, but you may just want to attend a cherry-picked topic or two.
Quick comment. We're working with and helping Commander Siegfried, an old friend of ours, Trey Siegfried, with respect to staff and our congressional delegation that should be there, and legislators who have had certainly a role in 2118. And something that I failed to mention, and I'm sure Secretary Gatz, my boss, was going to let me know about that, since it has to do with his boss and my boss. not only has 2118 passed the legislative process, it was signed yesterday morning by Governor Stitt. So that is really cause for celebration, and then just forget Secretary Gatz, I didn't mention that when I was up there.
So, any questions on number 12?
Okay. Grayson?
Number 13, the Choctaw Nation Emerging Aviation Technology Conference. I know our Commissioner Ritz was in attendance there, down there with us in Durant, Oklahoma at the casino resort for what was really what I'll call one of the premier, or the premier UAS conference in the state of Oklahoma, probably in the last 5, 10, maybe ever. We had obviously Governor Stitt lead us off, Speaker McCall followed behind, Chief Gary Batten shortly thereafter, and that is obviously the welcome ceremony from all the elected officials and showing how important UAS is to the state of Oklahoma. But then we really dug into the weeds, and it was very technical, but very enlightening on topics from using drones and weather to urban air mobility, the UAM concept that we hear routinely, to just talking about what the Choctaw IPP is doing. In fact, there's a little drone demo. One of the things that they're focused on is hog eradication, and how do they feed the hog traps remotely on these very far and expansive farms in eastern or western or wherever they are in Oklahoma or anywhere in the country that's having a hog issue. And they had a nice drone out there that hauled about a 10-pound package of corn that would pick it up and go drop it in the hog pen. Obviously, they demonstrated that in the parking lot for us, but it was a pretty neat event. We had all kinds of national expertise. Somebody from the White House was there. We had many attorneys that were there. We had somebody from CNN that was there. All the leading facets and figures of the UAS and drone industry were there to talk about the great things that are happening in the emerging technology that's continually changing. I'm sure even since then, that being 2 or 3 weeks ago, we've learned something new in the UAS and drone world. It changes that fast. So really was a great event, and I expect it to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I partook in the first one. It was about 100 people or so. I think this one had probably close to 300 or 350 people at it. So I expect it to continue to grow in size, but also maybe in length as well, and would recommend next year we'll let you know about it, and anybody interested in drones, I think, would be welcome to attend. It really is the next cool thing in aviation. I'll stand for any questions. Commissioner Ritz, anything to add to that? No? Okay.
Okay, Grayson, you have the FAA Arkansas Oklahoma Airport District.
Twice a year, our staff and FAA staff from the Airports District Office from Fort Worth get together to discuss all things funding and airports related. The spring meetings really to talk about future projects and what exactly is going on with our airport construction program. What does FAA agree with? What do we maybe have to find some common ground, or maybe have to shift some projects around based on budgetary numbers? And then obviously finally coming away from that meeting with somewhat of an agreement to move forward for that third year. It's really what we focus on, is that third year of discretionary and large big rock projects that are coming into the construction program. Which ones of those are going to move forward to year 2 and year 1 eventually get granted, and which ones do we need to maybe push back and wait a year on? So a great meeting. Nothing, we're not playing favorites in Ardmore Municipal, but it just happens to be a good middle ground between Oklahoma City and Fort Worth.
And they get donuts.
And we get donuts, and we get to eat at Jake's Joint. So that's, you guys have never been to Jake's Joint there at the Ardmore Municipal Airport, I'd recommend it. Good lunch and I think good dinner on the weekends. So, but great meeting as always with our staff. Good to introduce some of our new staff, good to introduce some of their new staff, and be able to meet face to face, because these are the people we interact with on a daily and even hourly basis sometimes. So it's good to have that connection and that relationship built. But I'll stand for any questions on that.
No questions? All right, 15, 5-year airport construction program. Grayson.
5-year airport construction program. We've got the PowerPoint here. We've got the tab behind you with the slides. Presented the draft program to you all at the March meeting, and don't want to run back through that 45-minute presentation. My vocal cords will thank you. But we have a few changes. Didn't receive any formal comments during our comment period, but did have a few interactions and a few verbal discussions, whether it's at the OAOA conference or on some conference calls or some meetings with airports. So I have a few changes, a few projects added, a few projects tweaked based on our conversations with the FAA and airports as well. The first one is an AWAS package. This is a group of AWASs that we're considering. We have seen, I think, and you remember some of our past conversations on AWASs, the FAA bar to be able to replace an existing AWAS or even put in a new AWAS is fairly high. And we're obviously working with our congressional delegation to lower that bar, whether that's through an FAA reauthorization bill in the future or some other mode at the federal level. But in the meantime, we have AWAS, we have weather equipment. Every pilot out there will tell you, in Oklahoma, weather changes. We need to know what's going on with the weather at our airport. We're not just talking the windsock. We need to know from a distance away from the airport, hey, can we make it in here? So AWAS, we're gonna, with this project, consider 4 replacement AWASs as well as 3 new AWASs. So replace 4 AWASs that are already existing and maybe bring 3 new airports into the system that don't have any AWAS right now. So about $1 million gonna be in 2022. And we'll probably see if we don't get our federal relief that we are hoping to get in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll probably see more of these AWAS packages provided in the ACP. We did this back in the mid to early 2000s too, when we were first putting in all these AWASs at various airports, and being a piece of equipment that only lasts 10 to 15 years, maybe 20 at best, it's time to start replacing those. About $1 million total project cost, 95-5 split between the commission and local sponsors. Next slide. Chickasha, after discussions with the FAA, we had this on the discretionary candidate list. It was kind of determined, well, we probably just for joint seal spall repair don't need discretionary money, so this ended up being just a state-only project for $500,000 in 2022. Next slide. This is a amended project. We slipped it back a year to allow the airport to accumulate a little bit more non-primary entitlement funding, added a little bit more commission funding, and for a total project cost to meet what the engineer's estimate is at about $1.9 million to reconstruct their crosswind runway. This is one of those situations where we've repaired it many times over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and we can no longer put the Band-Aid on the broken leg. We have to go ahead and fix the broken leg, reconstruct the entire runway. So, next slide. This is a new project added based on a discussion, again on discretionary candidate lists. This is another joint seal and spall repair project for a concrete runway. Probably doesn't rise to the level of needing discretionary money because it is still considered a minor repair, not a major repair. But given the length of the runway and given the size of the runway, it will be a somewhat expensive project at about $1.1 million, split between the FAA, $700,000, commission, $345,000, local of $55,000, scheduled for 2024.
Grayson, elaborate on something there if you would for the
Mhm.
commission, because I think they're all pretty familiar with the Enid project and our grant that was critical to extending that runway. So in this rehabilitation, is the FAA participating in the entire length, or?
We haven't got to that level of detail yet.
Okay.
This is a 2024 project, so it's the very end. More than likely, what we will do is we'll pick out particular funding items, whether that's the joint seal part, whether that's the marking part, that FAA will partake in. That was usually the easiest to keep the money separate between the FAA and the OAC. So you're right. We may only pay for, or the FAA may only pay for 7,000 foot of the runway. We may pay for the other 1,500 feet. Or we may divide it out upon like items. So we'll pay for markings, FAA pays for joint seal. Next slide. Fountainhead Lodge Airport. This is part of the unclassified airports we've talked about for the last 2 meetings. You all know we are acting as agent for the 15 unclassified airports that are airport sponsors, city-owned airports out there, to gather this $300,000 a year that Congress has gifted these unclassified airports. We have 3 airports that we are the purview, or the basically statutory sponsor of, owned by the Department of Tourism through long-term leases with the Army Corps of Engineers, so we're kind of considered co-sponsors in the FAA's eyes. The one that we know, we presented to you before, it's in the ACP, that is the Carlton Landing project. That was presented to you at the March meeting. We have this one, and the next slide will pop up for Fountainhead Lodge as well as Lake Texoma State Park Airport. Considering just doing some basic maintenance with this available NPE money at these airports. This is one of those key questions that we have to ask ourselves. You know, there is no based aircraft at these airports. Are they utilized for a tourism basis? Yes, they are. We think the new tourism director would be very interested, being a pilot himself, in the preservation of these airports. But really the key question we have to ask ourselves, and that's going to be what we'll investigate this summer from an engineering standpoint, is are they salvageable? We don't want to spend good money after bad, but if we can salvage these and we can put a Band-Aid on it to give us another 5 to 10 years of life to see what may happen on down the road, that's what we're proposing. That's what we're considering. We wouldn't receive a grant from FAA on this until probably late in September. We'll have enough time to do the engineering analysis and the technical look at these pavements, because they are old. These pavements were built back in the 70s and 80s, maybe even maybe in the late 60s. And they haven't had a whole lot of major repairs, unlike Carlton Landing, which we're moving forward on with the partnership, the P3 approach with the Humphreys Company. So Fountainhead Lodge Airport, there on Lake Eufaula, Lake Texoma, on the Lake Texoma Airport are both in this as projects we're proposing. And obviously we'll be considering more information coming forward this summer. And if we come back and the engineers say there's nothing we can do or it'd be a bad investment, we're going to listen to that. We're going to listen to that. If the conversation is it's time to reconstruct these runways, it's probably time to have that harder conversation of, well, it's not worth the reconstruction investment, but it may be worth the $300,000 of non-primary entitlement that that Congress has provided these airports. And unfortunately, unlike typical NPE monies, these are not transferable. It's use it or lose it proposition. So we can't transfer this to another airport that would want it. We can't even transfer it within ourselves and transfer it to Carlton Landing and send it all there. So it's use it or lose it on those particular airports. Next slide. McCurtain County Idabel Regional Airport, this project, same price, slid back a year to 2023. Next slide. Muskogee Davis Regional Airport, same project, same price. This one slipped forward a year from 24 to 23. Next slide. This is a new project at the R.L. Jones Jr. Airport, also known as Riverside. This is the rehab of their crosswind, which is utilized significantly for student training. We all know over 200,000 operations a year and growing at that airport. Their crosswinds used quite frequently when we have those southeast winds in the summertime or maybe those northwest winds in the wintertime. This will rehab that crosswind runway, relocate the lights to the standard separation, and add in PAPIs to each runway end for about $1.1 million. And again, this is very similar to the project at Enid, that, okay, it may not be time to reconstruct this one, but it is time to do some major rehab on that crosswind runway. Skytook, this one, price is staying the same, scope staying the same. It's moving forward a year from 21 to 20, based on our conversations with the FAA in our meeting a couple of weeks ago. Next slide. That's it? Okay. So that's it. So those are the changes to the airport construction program for 2020 to 2024. These changes, along with the presentation we did at the March meeting, we're requesting approval to move forward with that, and obviously we'll stand for any questions or comments.
What were the AWAS airports?
We don't have the airports identified yet. We just have okay, we're gonna invest the money, and as we start getting towards the construction year, we'll start evaluating which airports have the oldest AWASs, which ones ironically have been struck by lightning the most. That's usually one of the key cogs as to whether or not it's in good shape or bad shape. They seem to really like, one pole out there in the middle of the airport with no trees seems to be a magnet for lightning, so.
What was the cost per AWAS? Or do we determine that, or does the individual airport determine that?
Well, it'll be bidded projects, so on average, we're seeing about $150,000 to $200,000 a year, or $200,000 a system for AWAS.
Mine cost $85,000. I would suggest we might compare notes and try and get our costs down.
We certainly can.
You
we
said the
certainly can.
FAA's raised the bar on what these things have to be?
So the FAA's raised the bar to install them, and one of the things that FAA requires is some of the additional equipment that we like to put on them, the pressure sensors, the lightning sensors, and having that system be connected to the national data system so that you can pull it up on an iPad or an iPhone, as opposed to having to physically call on a landline, and it causes the cost to go up. Also,
Is that grandfathered, or all new ones have?
all new ones, yep, all new ones. So as they break and we have to replace them, it requires the new system to be put in line. Now, the one thing that FAA is requiring that's kind of become costly to us that we've talked about in the past is this benefit cost analysis, this analysis that we have to do before we even put in the system if we're going to use federal dollars, usually about $30,000-$40,000 of justification, which is what we're trying to work with our congressional delegation to do away with, basically. But with state money, that's one of the reasons why we're doing this with state money, is we don't have that benefit cost analysis. We don't have to deal with that justification process. But you're right, there is a cost savings that can be looked at, but at the end of the day, we have to comply with the Open Bidding Act and have to put that out to bid, and the bids that we received is what we have to go with.
Then you need more bidders.
And that's another issue that we're working with. There's been some consolidation within the industry too. Commissioner, just curious, when did you replace your AWAS?
I didn't replace it, I put a brand spanking new
Put a
one
new
in
one.
approximately 3 or 4 years ago.
3 or 4 years, okay.
You certified the tower, which ironically is shorter than the phone pole that's next to it.
Yes.
That's where the lightning goes.
Is that something we need to
Yeah.
talk about?
But I had to get that certified. Now, OG&E had no problem with the phone pole next to it.
Yeah. That's another conversation, but yes, I know we have that same issue from time to time on public airports. Why do we have to do the study on the airport when this thing right off the side of the airport didn't get studied?
They're 30 feet apart.
And they're 30 feet apart, right? Right. I
Any
shake
oth-
my head
Any other
sometimes.
questions?
Grayson, I'm curious, we see all these numbers all the time. How close to these estimates is the actual project coming in?
We do a pretty good job, and I know our engineers pride themselves on coming in close to the engineering estimates. I have not seen any projects go outside of the 10% waiver, high or low, in a long, long time. The one I know we've struggled with sometimes is vertical construction. So like the terminal building in Enid, given the cost of steel and the increase of cost of steel and the amount of steel that was in that terminal building, that cost was probably about 20%, 25% more than what the engineer had estimated. But for pavement, for lights, for electrical equipment, for navigational aids, we can get that within about 10%. But vertical and fuel systems are the other thing that we can kind of struggle with, that have more
And
variability.
occasionally there'll be a really nice Bristow, came in under.
Yeah, came in under.
Like significantly under.
Significantly, about $1.5 million, and that's kind of goes to show you that sometimes if you have a large quantity, and I know the engineers in the back of the room would know, you have a large quantity of whether it's asphalt or dirt work or concrete, 50 cents on a unit price item, one way or the other, can make or break your budget. I mean, in the case of Bristow, we had about $1 savings per square yard of dirt, and the amount of dirt they had to move, that saved us about $1.5 million. So it's those small fluctuations in a high volume type situation that can cause, I know Secretary Gatz knows all about this, and road and highway work, it can make all the difference. But I'd say I haven't seen any projects, pavement, non-vertical projects, be outside that 10% range in the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Jane? Is there a motion to accept?
I motion to approve.
Approve.
Second.
Jane?
Vice Chair Amos,
Aye.
Secretary Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Commissioner Conway,
Aye.
Chairman Potter.
Aye. South Grand Lake Regional Airport. Grayson?
Yes, the South Grand Lake Regional Airport has a project scheduled in our FY 2019 ACP to widen the runway, overlay the runway, and improve the safety area at the airport. This is a discretionary project, about $4+ million is what the cost estimate and funding numbers are right now. They have been a good airport. It's a good story. Come from 2005 as a little grass strip with about 50 acres of property. The local crew, local 9-person board came together, was able to fund themselves a 5,000-foot runway. We were able to provide about the last $200,000 to get them a jet-capable runway, got them into the federal system, made them eligible for federal money, and have continuously grown since that 2005 time period. There are now about 25 based aircraft, I think have 2 base jets. Several notable people are based at the airport and have a very lively, if you participate in Facebook or see any of our Facebook posts, have a very lively and very organized community down there for the airport. Unfortunately, the city is basically a sponsor in name only. They don't provide any of the matches, and basically they're passing the hat to get matches from the various entities for state and federal grants. This is the first time they've taken a grant of this nature, this size, this $4 million. Most of their grants have been, $600,000 or less in the last 10, 15 years since they've been in the federal system. As such, we're considering today a loan for their share of the match. As you know, with discretionary projects, the commission provides 5%, and we expect the locals to provide 5%. In the commission today, we are considering a loan for the sponsor's 5% share of the project. There's several questions I know that when we were going through this ourselves and considering this internally that we have to answer. First question is it legal? Is that allowed? And it is. Under our statutes, we can provide financial assistance to municipalities and airports by means of a grant or loan or both. So yes, we get to check that box. Is it the first time we've been doing this? Yes, it is. Does that provide us any concern? Sure it does. Anytime you're trying to do a precedential type mover, absolutely. But the key question is, when it comes to is it precedential, is should we do it? Is the reasons to do it in the affirmative and in the right way? And I believe so, yes. And the reasons why, this is discretionary money. This is additional money that FAA is bringing to the state of Oklahoma. We won't get this money back. If we decline to, or if the sponsor declines to take the grant, it's going to go to DFW or Houston International or Chicago O'Hare or somewhere else. It's not going to come back to the state of Oklahoma. It will also mean that the airport doesn't get an opportunity to get back into the discretionary queue. So that means the money the money needed to repair the runway is not going to just magically get better. The money needed to repair the runway will now be borne more on the state than it is on the FAA. And also the design's been paid for. It's going to go out to bid, and that's why we're coming to you today. You don't see a number in there, but we're coming to you with request to approve a loan on the concept. Once the bids come in and we go to approve the grant, we'll talk about what the actual number. We expect about $4 million project cost, 5% of that being about $200,000. It's going to be a 0% loan, payback over 10 years. We believe that the sponsor, given their operating revenue, about $50,000, $60,000 a year, has the wherewithal to pay back the OAC for this particular loan. We wouldn't be bringing this to you if we did not think that. It is a very special, limited circumstance. I don't see us ever getting into a situation where we're going to loan a sponsor their local match for a non-primary entitlement grant or an OAC grant or maybe even a state apportionment grant. It's going to have discretionary money in it in order for us to rise to this level, because that discretionary money we can't keep in the state. We can transfer those other monies. We can transfer the entitlement money, we can transfer the apportionment money, we can transfer the OAC money to various other projects. We can't do that in this case. We do have a couple of people here, I think, that would like to speak about the airport. I know Senator Bergstrom is with us in the audience. Senator, would you like to say a few words about the airport?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Secretary Gatz. Good to see you again. I appreciate having the opportunity to express my support for this proposal. It is, of course, as you can probably guess, within my district. I've been involved with things going on out there in the airport, economic development, things that we're working on out there as well. As you're aware, the South Grand Lake Regional Airport in Ketchum is a jewel in the crown of Northeast Oklahoma. The story there is quite incredible. It's extremely important to the region's local economy. It's important to the future of tourism in the area. And it's important for economic development in the region as well. It is, after all, the only airport on the west side of Grand Lake. With that in mind, obtaining the FFA grant, or FAA grant for the airport is necessary for upgrading it to the FAA standards and to stay on track into the future. Under the stewardship of Brent Howard and the airport board, we've seen the development of a top quality airport, and such an airport that when I meet with business leaders, and I've met with a number where I talk to them about bringing business to the area, and I talk to them about what we have to offer there, and I start describing the Ketchum Airport, those that are not from that area are surprised to learn that we have this type of quality in that area. And I'll get them on the website and show them what's there, and they're like, I had no idea. I think that shows them what we have to offer, and so therefore, with this airport being a success story as it is, this funding can help it be an even greater success story, and to help Oklahoma and this area of Oklahoma to succeed and be more, more employment opportunities and a greater tax base. So with that, I appreciate the Commission's approval of this funding. Thank you.
And I think we also have Jim Brown here, the vice chair from the Airport Trust.
Jim has given up football to be on the airport authority board.
I also drive a tractor and mow there too.
Everyone does something. That's amazing about this everyone has a job.
I was
Yeah,
wondering how that was gonna fit into that $50,000 a year budget.
Well, appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about what's been presented to you this morning. I think one of the things that I'm sure is under consideration is our ability to repay this money, and I'm happy to share with you that our fuel sales have grown continuously. We now have a jet fuel truck, so we can fuel larger jets that need that type of fueling help. Also, another big thing that's happening at our airport is the leasing of lots and the building of hangars, which in turn brings more based operators. We have currently we have one mechanic, A&P-AI, that has set up shop at our airport. We have 3 other aircraft-related businesses that are airport brokerage business, and also we have a fellow that's building a hangar that's an American Airlines pilot that is instructing. When he retires, he plans to instruct full-time there. But fuel sales are increasing. Our fundraising continues. That's been what's been the lifeblood of what we've been able to accomplish through the help of Director Byrd and the Aeronautics Commission. It would have happened without that. From a 3,000-foot grass strip to what we have today is a pretty incredible story, and we were quite honored and pleased to receive the Airport of the Year award last week at the OAOA conference. So appreciate your consideration of this, and thank you for your time.
One thing I'd like to note to you, Commissioners, on your left side of your packet, I believe you'll find a letter from the chairman of the Airport Authority, Brent Howard, who is also the manager of the year. But something and Grayson's already referenced this, they have raised right at $800,000 in private donations over the years. When we entertained and considered investing the last $200,000 necessary to build a jet-capable runway there, paved, they had raised all the other money. It really, as then Governor Henry and the legislative delegation from up there said, basically 5,000-foot runway. I know there's the displaced threshold, and I understand those things these days. Unfortunately, that never was supposed to be part of my software up there, but it is. But $200,000, we got a 5,000-foot runway and a really great airport in an area of the state that is seeing dramatic growth.
Anybody have any questions?
How would the loan actually, would it be a formal loan through OAC or through DOT?
It would be a formal loan through us. So if you look underneath this tab 16, You'll see a very similar agreement with ODOT. ODOT does this with communities across the state for moving utilities that are associated with road projects. And some of these communities can't come up with their shares for those utility relocations. We would be doing something very similar. Basically what we would be doing is instead of, when we do our billing on the project, instead of paying for 5%, we'll pay for the 10% and then record what the 5% is. And when the project's done, they're gonna start paying that 5% back, whatever that number is divided by 10. They'll pay that back to us over that 10-year period.
If we approve it, then you'll establish the terms and be able to tell us.
Right, so more than likely, we're gonna come back to you at the July meeting with what the final numbers are, because at that point, we'll have bids in hand. But this is really, so before we go to bid, or before we accept the bids, the FAA needs us to, okay, have your funding sources in place. And so that's really what this is allowing us to do. If you approve this today, we can tell the FAA, we have our funding sources in place, we know how we're going to do the 10% match, and then we'll come back to you at the July meeting, or maybe the August meeting, depending on when the bids are opened.
We should have a draft agreement by then, but we are, and I think Grayson has mentioned this, we're modeling it after an ODOT program that it has engaged in for some time. And I think most importantly, I wouldn't even ask you to entertain it. It is lawful, has always been. It's been there, goes back to when we were reestablished in 1963, but I actually think it was in the legislation from the original, your predecessor, the Oklahoma Aviation Commission, dating from 1946.
Any other comments or questions for Grace?
When you say passing the hat, I'm assuming that's a legal term, right?
That is a legal term, of literally passing the hat. No,
Who is feeding the hat?
We even think Senator Inhofe probably put in, a couple bucks.
a couple of dollars.
Patrons that come in there?
Patrons of the airport, members there along the lake community that want to see the area succeed. Really, this airport is a great example that other airports of local fundraising. I mean, they have, Jim, help me out here, is it 3 or 4 main events throughout the year? Typically 3. 3? They have 3 main events throughout the year that bring in $10, $15, $20,000. Whether that's a lunch or a dinner at a hangar, or whether that's bringing in the community for an air show. Really is quite amazing, the community support and the grassroots they've had there on the west side of Grand Lake. So it's usually, the west side of Grand Lake is well-to-do.
The new buzzword is P3, public-private partnership. Indeed, the legislature even passed a fairly comprehensive model-type act in 2017, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Bergstrom. And we've kind of been doing this. I mean, this was one before that was passed, and before it kind of became, what was the old song, I Was Country Before Country Was Cool? Yeah, before it became this is a public-private partnership. The private part of this underlies the success of the airport, and that has continued. They have made every match from the state or federal government by literally passing the hat.
Are we gonna require any guarantees or guarantors?
Well, they're gonna sign it.
Yeah.
I mean, the airport authority is gonna sign the agreement. And, as Grayson has said, based upon their revenues alone that they're generating now, but then again, with their capacity to privately raise funds, we'll have a legally enforceable agreement.
So is it the private side that's selling the fuel and leasing the hangars, or how does that work?
It's the
No,
airport.
it's the airport.
They're branded, I think, with Epic Fuels. Recently branded with Epic Fuels, but it's the airport that's
Yeah.
leasing the ground and the airport that's operating the fuel system.
Okay, so where does the private part fit in?
The private part's the builders of the hangar and the operators of the airport, and the fact that they're passing the hat around, just helping the
The
airport.
rest of
and
it's just been,
It's just in donations of time. These 9 individuals all have private companies in that area of the world, and somebody's mowing the grass, somebody's clearing the drainage canals, somebody's the electrician, somebody's the upkeep on the buildings. They're all pitching in any way they can to help.
And in return, it brings in tourism, or
Tourism brings in.
feeds their local
Right.
you
businesses.
take one of the members of the board is Art Box, who's owns, some of you probably maybe stayed there. It's a very nice inn up there, Pine Lodge. He's on the board. you know, there is certainly something for him that people fly in there and stay at Pine Lodge, whether it's one of their events or another time. You would like this one, Commissioner Hunter.
Okay,
Staff
do I hear a
recommend
motion?
Staff does recommend approval, yes, sir.
approval. Move to approve.
Second.
Got a. Jane?
Vice Chair Amos,
Aye.
Secretary Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Commissioner Conway,
Aye.
Chairman Potter.
Aye. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Airport Construction Grant Program, Grayson.
Got a few items here into the Airport Construction Grant Program. One is a new grant. This is for the Okmulgee Regional Airport, rehab of the parallel taxiway and runway systems. We're out to bid right now. We won't have bids for about another week, so this is based on the engineer's estimate. Total project cost about $725,000, funded OAC $538,000, $150,000 of FAA money, and about $36,000 of sponsor matching funds. Obviously, this will be contingent upon receiving a acceptable grant application based on bids, once that's sent to us, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So staff recommends approval, but I'll answer any questions.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Jane, we have a motion and a second.
Vice Chair Amos,
Aye.
Secretary Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Commissioner Conway,
Aye.
Chairman Potter.
Aye. Next, part B.
B, so this is an amendment to an existing state grant application. Although, yes, the Bristow Airport was a good story, sometimes with good stories comes some concern, but again, we have to go with the low bidder. And I know the construction company out there is struggling a bit. They're a little bit behind schedule, and so liquidated damages is coming into play. As you all know, our grant application, when that's submitted and executed, it's a line item not to exceed. So what's happening is, basically, we're removing money from the construction line item, and then in the form of liquidated damages, moving that over to the inspection item. So it's a no-cost proposition. Our share will not exceed, but we do need to request your approval of being able to move those funds, those line item adjustments from construction to inspection. And we believe this is, sometimes you get a situation where, well, is it really the contractor's fault? But we do believe that this is a legitimate need for the additional inspection that's at this particular project. Staff recommends approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jane?
Vice Chair Amos,
Aye.
Secretary Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Commissioner Conway,
Aye.
Chairman Potter.
Aye.
Item C is another amendment to an existing state grant application. The project was at Clinton Regional Airport to replace the runway lights and the PAPIs. About 4 or 5 weeks into the project, they had a huge windstorm come through there and knock down the wind cone. So since they had an electrical contractor on site, and we thought it was a good idea for the airport not to go without a windsock for an extended period of time or having to do that as a separate project, we requested, or the airport requested, a change order to add in a windsock while the contractor was on site. This will not increase the scope or not increase the cost of the project because they have some underruns in some other areas. Obviously, we're not always in the business of, okay, well, we're giving you this pot of money, and so therefore you can use it however you want and make sure that as long as it doesn't increase our total cost, you can spend it how you want. That's not the way we do business. We typically want this scope. We don't like scope creep. But given the situation of the item failing in the middle of this project, we figured this was an acceptable change order and are requesting your approval of so much to add in this windsock and to add the scope change. Again, the overall commission share will not increase. Staff recommends approval.
Okay.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jane?
Vice Chair Amos,
Aye.
Secretary Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Commissioner Ray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritz,
Aye.
Commissioner Conway,
Aye.
Chairman Power.
Aye. Grayson, Carlton Landing.
Carlton Landing, some good developments on Carlton Landing. We came to you all, I think it was almost going back a year and a half, maybe two now, of an issue, maybe not that far, maybe just a year and a half, of water lines underneath our Carlton Landing development, where we have the public-private partnership. We're building the pavement. Humphrey's company is building the hangars and the fuel system. There was a water line and a gas line that ran underneath that service a facility out there that's not part of the state. As you know, we first pitched to them and really negotiated hard to, okay, split the cost with us, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That didn't go anywhere. We floundered around for about a year trying to get everybody to agree to those terms, and that really didn't have any success. So now it was, okay, we just need to move forward. We need to get this project off High Center, so we're splitting it 50-50 with the Humphreys Company. But even then, there has to be a permit that's signed by the Department of Environmental Quality, ODEQ. And that was, there was some debate about, okay, do we have to get them to sign off on it? Can we sign off on it? Can tourism or somebody else sign off on it? And I think we finally wrangled that tiger to the ground about last week? Last week. Finally wrangled that tiger to the ground and are able to.
Destroyed the mountain. It became a molehill.
Became a small molehill and got it overcome. But we're gonna have tourism sign the DEQ application, move forward. Again, really the water is not gonna be turned off for more than a couple hours. It's gonna be at night, so we're inconveniencing our entities as little as possible, trying to be the best customer service stewards as possible for this entity, and do what we can and get this successful, what we believe will be successful venture moving forward. So I expect we'll be going out to bids in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, and hopefully we'll see some dirt turning this summer.
Mark and On and John Travolta and Tom Cruise will be able to continue their work.
All right.
All right, and
Any questions?
back behind the tab, if anybody wants to take a look at it, is the diagram of what it's gonna look like, and you can see where the lines are running, but we presented to you before, but I figured good for a refresher.
Refresh my memory, moving the lines?
Moving the lines, yes, so on the picture you have in
Foundation
front of you,
lines.
they're moving down towards the bottom of the page, just outside of where the hangars would be, between the hangars and the roadway.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Grayson.
Thank you.
Sandra. Tell me how a bill becomes a law.
She's replaced the old thing that used to be on public television,
Yeah.
and she's even got her own
Let's hear
jingle.
about it.
Do you want the song?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not doing it. Okay, so, morning Commissioners, you have come into the home stretch of our meeting, and now the fun has begun. I just have some pictures for you. So occasionally I'm asked to present a skit that I do. I've been doing this skit for about 15 years now on how a bill becomes a law. And how I came about doing this was when I worked for Dr. Ray McCarter. He was an old superintendent, and we developed this skit. And we would go to his schools and teach young people how a bill becomes a law, and so therefore it's just stuck. And so this year I spoke to 3 different groups from the Lawton area, from Senator Barrington's former district, and they came to the Capitol. This is Leadership Lawton here that you're seeing, and this is the 3 branches of government.
That's not a legislator, is it?
One's the executive branch, and one is the legislative branch, and then she is part of the judiciary. And I always tell them that the legislative and executive branches uphold the judiciary. So this is the demonstration of that. And this must be a commission first, Director. And this is
I'm just glad to see that's really not Senator Treat. I thought for a moment it was.
Yeah, this is Great Plains Technology Center. So Director Byrd wanted me to let you know that I am out and about speaking on behalf of the commission. And every time I present this, we also encourage them to explore aviation and aerospace careers. So, the next item.
Real quickly, if I could, Commissioners, we're laughing a little bit, but I mean, the importance of this is, of course, we're teaching younger Oklahomans and informing them about the legislative process. I think Sandra tells me occasionally even some legislators sneak in and they're kind of like, oh, yeah, okay. But the importance of it is relationships. So when we deal with this, I mean, there's interesting things that build relationships. And legislators are very appreciative when Sandra comes and does this. It's much more appealing. You saw those young people were engaged than the old, the bill dancing, and you were wondering, gosh, is that really something? But yeah, Sandra's is better. And the other thing it does is it raises our stature.
Thank you, Director. Okay, if I'll stand for any questions. And if anybody ever wants to come to the Capitol when I'm doing one of these, if you have any interest, just let me know, and I'll put you on the schedule. Okay, there's no
Okay.
interest. Noted.
Oh,
What
you
about
never
the
know.
art contest?
Aviation art contest, okay. Thank you, sir. We had a great aviation art contest ceremony at the Oklahoma State Senate Chamber, and these are our winners here. And I'm just gonna scroll through some photos. This is Senator J.J. Dossett. We had a great turnout for lawmakers to come and be with us, and this young man is precious. This is Brecker Tubbs from Owasso, and he was very proud of his art. And he was proud to have his picture made with his senator, and the Owasso paper covered his story twice. And so we were very happy about that. And this is Paula Keaty from Ada Public Schools. Ada Public Schools has done something interesting too, and man, is Paula Keaty on fire. I just love her. They, in tandem with our art contest, do their own art contest among their entire school. And so some of their winners were our winners. So I really appreciated that.
Ada, the AOPA high school too, so I'm sure you all know.
Yes. Okay, I yield for any questions on the aviation.
Tell them how many entries. I mean, we have another record this year.
Well, we had a little over 1,200 entries, and this year we had 86 schools, which was more than any time before that we've ever had. We had 86 schools, which is good. We're growing it. Yes, sir.
Our art teacher, one thing she said is the kids that are in our art classes are not the typical kids that get to come to Oklahoma City a lot.
Right.
A lot of them have never traveled, and so she's really appreciative of it. She thought
Yeah,
it was great.
Guyman has
Really
a
thought
great
it was
art
great to
teacher.
be able to bring those students.
Good deal. I yield for any questions or comments.
Okay.
Director Byrd sent me to AUVSI in Chicago and wanted me to just touch briefly on this. And I just want to just take a moment to tell you that whenever you see these big conferences, being a person that comes from the legislature for 20 years, I was a little skeptical on what state agencies might be doing at these conferences, thinking that they were, maybe not using the state dollars at its best. And I was so pleased to get to go to this because I saw that the money that is spent by the agencies is really well used. Commerce did a great job with the Oklahoma booth, and on one side was the Oklahoma State University, and Dr. Jamie Jacob came. And I don't know if you know this or not, but for drones, and Grayson help me, they're the first in the nation to have a UAS doctorate program. Is that right?
Yeah, the first engineering master's doctorate program
Yeah.
that has a UAS specific focus.
So they brought all these students. It was really great. Dennis Altendorf was there also with me, and you can see here.
He is hiding back there.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the Oklahoma State students here. But I wanted to tell you that I did find value in this. There was a lot of people coming to Oklahoma companies, and most of them were international companies. Who was across from us, Dennis?
Excuse me?
Who was across from us? Denmark, right?
Yeah, Denmark was right across.
Yeah, so Denmark was right across from us, and I did visit with Oklahoma companies. We had a great conversation with Kratos, and we're going to get Director Byrd and Grayson connected with them as well. And these are just some of the people from the Oklahoma delegation. James Grimsley was there, Dr. Jamie Jacob, Eddie Compton, and the guy on the end, Dennis, do you know who that is?
He's the Denmark guy.
Osage Tribe, yeah, yeah. Okay, and that is all I have for you on that, and I would yield for any questions.
General Whitcomb is with us, head of the ACES program, Commerce, and General, good, we feel good about the AUVSI show?
Yes, sir, very much so. So, it was actually the second show in succession we've done. We've done the MRO show the week before. We had better traffic than was anticipated, and several leads that are being worked.
So see, your $5,000 was well invested.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I would recognize James Grimsley as the speakers recent addition to the Transportation Commission.
Okay.
So he joined us Monday for the Transportation Commission meeting, and certainly is a tremendous addition to the Transportation Commission and their charge.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay. What about upcoming events?
Well, we had a very busy April, and so I want to just share some things with you. Went to the Ponca City fly-in that they have once a month. I would suggest to you, if you have the opportunity to go to that, it was really great, and I was very surprised. They had probably 100 people there. Their airport is so loved, and I got to drive down the runway and take a look at it, saw some FOD, and we stopped and picked it up. It was very enriching to me. So
Maybe you could teach some of our
yeah,
manufacturers something about
and
that.
so that was good. And Representative Luttrell was there, and Mayor Homer Nicholson was there, and we had a great time there.
Two great
And
supporters
this
of
is their
ours.
beautiful airport here, and I know that everybody loves Enrique's there, and I did not get to eat there. But it was a great time. Those fly-ins are really important, and we try to go to as many as we can. This is the Ada Airport AOPA Flight Night Gala that Grayson and I attended. It was pouring down rain, and we survived it. And they had a fantastic turnout, and their students served the adults. It was really kind of a neat deal. And Paula Keaty was
That lady again.
just amazing. Yes, Paula Keaty. And Marky Martin was their keynote speaker from Channel 5. She is also a pilot. And this is another picture from there with Manager Cody Holcomb and Mayor Trey Landrum. Trey Landrum is a doctor. He is also a pilot. And there are two other physicians there that are pilots that are flying using the Oklahoma airport system to visit patients. And so that was pretty neat to get to visit with them about that. Norman Westheimer Airport, Adam Fox, we put him straight to work, and he attended last Saturday, and they had, Adam, you want to speak to this?
Sure. He made sure Jalen Hurts was there.
You have 1 minute.
So this
Yeah,
this
he
event
does.
was great, especially if you are dog lovers. They're raising money for Pilot and Paws. It was great to actually get to know OU students a little bit, get to see their mascot. You know, of course, I was out there yelling War Eagle the whole time, but so it was great. It was a good turnout. There were lots of dogs, lots of people. The restaurant there, I was amazed. There was like no seating available whatsoever. They had
Yeah.
food trucks out there. It was a really great event. I was glad to be a part of it.
Adam's going to be a great addition to our team, and so this is in the back of your packets here. Adam and Grayson are going to Stroud this weekend, and I will be going to Angel Flights at Wiley Post if anybody wants to go with me. They are having a barbecue there, and if you have any questions or if you want to submit events to me, we always try to include those in Flight Bites, and I would yield for any questions. Also, Air Show is in your packet too. There's a little card there for you. If you would please let me know if you plan on attending the air show and what day you might like to attend, okay? And if you will email me about that, Commissioner Putnam, okay? And there's some information on Oshkosh too. I'd be happy to yield for any questions.
We'll be sending anybody to Oshkosh for the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission?
We are, yep.
Will we have the Oklahoma Aviation Day?
Yep.
Lunch and all that? Okay. That's the only reason I go.
We'll be a sponsor.
So the last thing I just want to conclude with, as we talk about events, Deirdre Gurry is Lieutenant Colonel out at Vance Air Force Base and has become a friend of the Commission's. She recently flew to all 108 airports within the Oklahoma airport system. She got lots of coverage for doing that in the Journal Record and the Daily Oklahoma and the Enid Eagle News, and so we want to congratulate her in that as well. So thank you so much, Commissioners.
Thank you, Sandra.
Sandra will also be attending a forum hosted by Congresswoman Horn this Saturday about aerospace manufacturing in Oklahoma and workforce issues. I will be attending my daughter's hooding ceremony at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's getting her PhD in international affairs. And I will have to say, that is more important to me, so I hope you don't, But Sandra's going to sub for me, and I know she'll do it admirably. Commissioners, want to say one thing about the agenda, and I'll be quiet. I'm amazed we got through it by noon. We're involved in a lot of things, and during the session, time gets very tight. Many, many years ago, we went from the every month to the every other month. I think that's been very efficient. It has worked
I think by and large admirably. But I can see a case sometimes that we ought to be maybe perhaps meeting monthly. Or I know I promised long ago, and I've done this successfully mainly for you, Commissioner Amos, we get it done in 2 hours. But sometimes I always want to make sure that you get more than less, and you have more information than you need to exercise good judgment. That I think is my most fundamental responsibility. So I think it's something I'd like you to think about, and we discuss it even perhaps before December when we set our regularly scheduled meetings for the upcoming calendar year. And last thing, I promise, but we talk about it, and it's kind of gotten somewhat rote now, and Grayson certainly discussed the Choctaw Nations Unmanned Conference, but it is something we all should be really, really proud of. Only 10 sites selected to be the integrated pilot program. Our site that was selected here was the Choctaw Nations proposal, and they are the only tribe that was selected across the United States. So it's a great thing for the nation and for Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic.
Thanks, Victor.
Okay, next meeting's when, Sandra? July 10th, right here. Okay.
We're gonna do something different on that too. We're gonna start sending you calendar invites, so you can just accept the calendar invite, just straight to your calendar. And that way you can let me know if you're attending.
Okay. Any new business? Hear none? We're adjourned.